Competition in the residential world is already ruthless, but then comes along a firm like Compass, who's raised so much money that it's incredibly hard for other firms to keep up. How are brokerages in New York adjusting to the new venture-backed reality? I think the big question this year, or the big story this year rather, has been Compass again. They've raised a tremendous amount of money. I think the last round they raised, DB, was what?
$450 million from SoftBank.
That's an incredible amount of money. It's like not even game changing. They're operating in a different world now. I don't think just talk a little bit about how this happened, how this came together.
Well, it was actually kind of quick, and it almost caught everyone by surprise. So for the past few years, Compass has raised around almost every year, September, October time. And this past November, they actually raised $100 million Series E.
Which was an expected round and put their valuation at $1.2 billion, roughly.
Actually, a little bit higher than that. But it put their valuation, it had broken that $1 billion mark before, but it put them even higher. And for that round, Fidelity participated, so they cited it as a big win to have Fidelity in the mix, and they were kind of on their way. People were speculating about an IPO, etc. And then almost out of nowhere, they announced a $450 million investment from SoftBank. And I've got to say the phones were a little quiet the next day. Traditionally, the brokerage world has been very skeptical, and we'd hear a lot of chatter the next day. And this time, it kind of quieted the naysayers because at this point, Compass just has so much money. They have close to $800 million raised from venture backers.
So is Compass a residential brokerage anymore? They've resisted that tag for a long time, and really that's what they do. They buy and sell real estate on behalf of people. What are they now? It seems like with that kind of money, it's unclear.
You know what? Compass bills itself as both. It doesn't want to be pigeonholed in either one. They don't want to be just a real estate company or just a tech company. They're both. And basically their premise is that they have this technology and they're using brokerage to demonstrate how effective it can be.
And you have something like Uber that really did disrupt sort of the taxi business, right? It's a completely new way of operating or moving around a city. Compass so far hasn't really shown something that is dramatically different. So how have they convinced investors that they are, in fact, like the real deal?
I can't jump inside the head of an investor, but what I can say, and a lot of the brokerage industry has been very skeptical. What are they doing? They're spending so much money. How are they different? What is their technology? But they clearly have something that investors like. And what's interesting about Zillow is that they're not a real estate company either. They're a media company. They basically generate revenue from advertising.
Right. But Compass doesn't do that. I mean, Compass's main revenue is still brokerage commissions, right?
Exactly.
And they haven't necessarily been a standout performer in New York. So they've started to go national.
Robert Refkin, Compass's CEO, said we're going to have 20% market share in 20 major U.S. cities by 2020. And so, he basically said we're not only in markets like New York and San Francisco, but we're going to Phoenix, Dallas, and Seattle. And by the way, Seattle is a really important market for Compass. Not only is Zillow based there, but so is Redfin. Redfin is another venture-backed tech brokerage that IPO'd this summer. And the industry has really watched Redfin closely to see, okay, what's the future of real estate tech?
Redfin is, again, one of those companies like Compass where they're like, does the emperor have any clothes if we peer? And so far on the public markets, it's done quite well. But again, there seems to be an inbuilt skepticism with those companies. So how have the New York brokerages responded to Compass? They initially saw them as sort of a punching bag. This is a joke. This is sort of the foolhardiness of venture money coming into the space. But they've kept raising money. And they've kept raising money. And at some point, the brokerages have to take them seriously, right? Has that point come?
Well, yeah, I think that initially there was no shortage of critics when it came to Compass. They were everyone's favorite punching bag, like you said. I think over time, Compass has forced its competitors in New York to up their game, whether it's raising the bar on its own technology or listing systems or what have you. The brokerages in New York, they want to keep their market share. They don't want to lose top agents and managers to Compass, and so they're upping their game.
And they really reshuffled in terms of leadership as well, right? We just heard that Bess Friedman became president of Brown Harris Stevens. Brown Harris Stevens and Christie severed ties. And then Douglas Elliman, there's been some interesting news out of Elliman as well. So you had Scott Durkin, who came over from Corcoran, was installed as president, and that really changes the way that that company works, right? So talk about that.
Sure. I mean, I don't think that you can say all of those changes are related to Compass, but I think that we're at an inflection point in the residential brokerage industry where the status quo isn't acceptable any longer. And so Brown Harris Stevens is run like a well-oiled machine, but you have someone like Bess Friedman who's coming in and refreshing the brand and changing things. You also have Douglas Elliman, which has been on an expansion tear nationwide. It's in markets that it hadn't been in 5 years ago. It's in Westchester, Miami, Aspen, California. This past year, they acquired TELUS, which is a fast-growing company in LA. It's acquiring another company in Boston, and they're spending money to do it, to market themselves and to do it. Most recently, they've had some changes at the top. They've promoted Scott Durkin, who was the chief operating officer, to president. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and whether there are other changes ahead.
And Durkin just came on about a year ago from Corcoran, right? So you've had this established power structure of Dottie Herman, Howard Lorber. And then there's been some shuffle here and there, but pretty much those two have been in charge. Recently, the way that the reporting structure has changed, it looks like Scott has tremendous influence of the company, and there may be more changes to come.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And there are a lot of big personalities there, and I don't think anyone's suggesting, for no matter how much power Scott Durkin has consolidated, I think the buck still stops with Howard Lorber. He has a strong connection to developers and has been a huge proponent of the new development marketing. His New Valley is an investor in a lot of the projects. That's helped Elliman get some marketing assignments.
What do you think the role of an agent versus a brokerage will be in coming years? Initially, the brokerage held all the clout. Then in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen brokers essentially hold those listings, and then see a lot of competitors come in, so they have leverage. They can jump over to other firms, get better commissions, get better terms. What are we seeing now, and what do you expect to see?
I think that the big shift to make an agent have, his or her own brand, I think that's happened, and there's no undoing that. But I think each company is different, and there's sort of a hybrid model. I don't think that you're going to move back from having agents own their own brands. But those are not the big money makers for brokerages. For brokerages to be profitable, they need to have agents who are going to produce, who are going to sell, and whose splits, are fair to the agent, but also let the brokerage pocket.
The silent majority, maybe.
Maybe.
Right.